And so, since I am learning how to be responsible with my relationship with God, I am now learning how to pray. I am now learning how to fast. I am now learning how to think selflessly. I'm somebody that likes to fit in. I'm somebody that likes acceptance. And rejection was very, very big for me. And because rejection was very, very big for me, it was always hard to get pushed back. I couldn't deal with rejection. I had a hard time with rejection. Rejection was one of those things that really hurt me more than anything else. I always loved a good compliment. Hey, good job. You know what? You did great today. But when I received criticism, hey, you need to fix this, you need to fix that area. And then people began to come into my life, leaders, pastors, and they began to correct these areas of my life. It was really hurting my ego. It was really hurting my pride. It was really hurting my persona. Because I grew up trying to find my identity, but now rejection is beginning to sink in very, very. Welcome to episode 3 of the Safe Haven podcast. I am excited to be home. If you saw the last episode, I took some time and I was out in Havana, Cuba. I went to the island of Cuba and I had a really good time out there, and I was able to invest in the church that's being built out there. But as well, I also had some time with the pastor. And if you haven't seen it, go to the YouTube channel, watch the previous video, and you can see the interview that I had with Pastor Abel, the pastor of Alcance Victoria, Havana, Cuba. And I think you'll enjoy the interview. We covered a lot of subjects. We covered family, we covered culture, and just a great conversation. Had a really good time out there, but I am happy to be back in my studio. Very, very happy to be back in my studio. Now, for episode 3, one thing that I really wanted to do, my whole entire focus with this podcast has been creating a safe space to be able to talk and to be able to seek the truth, to be able to find answers and meaning to life's most difficult questions. Also, a space to be able to come and genuinely have open conversation. And what better way for me to kick off this episode than for me to open myself up a little bit? I'm going to be sharing, obviously, my story with all of you guys, and I'll be going over different aspects of my story and where it has led me to and into where I am today. So, what better way than for me, to be able to come in and just open up with you guys. And again, the entire intention is to be able to share a lot of my life experience in hopes that this helps anybody watching this episode and that it may be able to contribute to your life. And if we had similar experiences and we can relate in any way, that's the goal, to be able to relate, to communicate, and like I said, to be able to have a safe space where we can seek the truth. So let me go ahead and get started with my story. So my name is Alex Figueroa, Alejandro Figueroa, of course. That is my legal name. Obviously, Alex for short, but Alejandro is my legal name. I'm 29 years old. And back, obviously, when I was a kid, I grew up, and I grew up in a household with a single mom, and a single mom having to raise 4 boys by herself. So I am obviously one of 4 boys, and I am the youngest, and I am the baby of the family. And so, I definitely got the good end of it. I definitely got a little bit more spoiled than the other siblings. I know that the stereotype is the youngest sibling is the one that always gets spoiled the most. But nonetheless, I am the youngest sibling. I did get obviously spoiled a little bit more than my older brothers. But growing up and starting off with my childhood, Growing up, being raised by a single mom with four boys is definitely not an easy life. So my mother would work two jobs. My mother was always working, making sure that she did what she needed to do to be able to provide a life for four boys. That's a lot of mouths to feed, especially when you got four boys. We're like vacuum cleaners. It's a lot of food, a lot of maintenance, a lot of trouble. Me and my brothers, we love combat sports. And so even as kids, we would break everything, and my brothers would wrestle with each other, and we would fight with each other, and not fighting in the sense of not liking each other, but we simply enjoyed watching combat sports, mixed martial arts, boxing. And so me and my brothers, we pretty much grew up together, and we would wrestle, we would fight, we would go onto the grass, roll around and practice jujitsu. And so that was pretty much a lot of our childhood. We would also watch wrestling, and I know wrestling has definitely been getting more and more popular as I see throughout the media, that wrestling has been getting more and more popular. But that was our life. That was what me and my brothers would do for a little bit of entertainment. We didn't have much. My mother was always working, but we would find ways to be able to find entertainment, so, and fighting, wrestling, and boxing, all of that was definitely one way for us to be able to escape, to be able to deal with issues. So you can imagine, my mother having to work and then coming home, and her kids are either bruised up from all the play fighting, and she would come home, find us wrestling with each other. She'd open the door, and in the living room, there's my two older brothers, wrestling one on top of the other, trying to choke the other one out. If you watch combat sports, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But life wasn't always, sunshine and rainbows. Life did get a little bit difficult. It was always tough, not having a parent figure in the house most of the time. And although my mom was doing the best that she could to provide the best life that she could for her sons, my mom was always working. And so me and my brothers, were always finding ways to take care of each other. Me being the youngest, I was always the one being taken care of. My three older brothers did everything they could to make sure that each one of us were okay. I was way too young to be able to contribute anything. But that was our life. We had a working mother. We had, everything that we needed to survive. And this completely led us to a point where, as we were growing up, one of my oldest brother fell into a cycle of drug addiction. And through this time, it was a little bit difficult for my mother to be able to see my oldest brother fall into a cycle of drug addiction. As well, for me, being such a young kid, being exposed to a lot of, the drug addiction habits that my brother had was a little bit difficult to watch. So as a young kid, I am seeing, my brother and his friends either smoking or drinking. And so I'm getting exposed to, alcohol and drugs at a young age. And this is how we got to the church. And I'm really grateful for the church, because throughout this time, my brother falling in this cycle of drug addiction, my brother went into the rehabilitation center, and the church provided a very, very big help and a very safe place for my brother to be able to go in and do his best at rehabilitating his life. This is how I got to the church. So I'm roughly about 8 years old. I'm getting to the church. My brother is in the rehabilitation center. And so we make this church our home. And so now I'm attending church regularly. The church was definitely lending a huge hand to my mother because there was so much church activity going on. And because of the church activity going on, we were always active inside of the church. I was always in children's church. My brothers were in the youth ministry. My oldest brother was in the rehabilitation center. So ministry and church then really became a huge fundamental part of our lives. So now, I am in the church. I'm serving in children's church, and I'm attending the children's classes, and I'm attending Sunday school. And this has brought in a new lifestyle into my life. So at a very, very young age at the church, I immediately began to spend most of my time at the church. That's where I was most of the time, with my mother continuing to work and continuing to still provide a life for her sons. The church was a safe place, and I'm really, really grateful for that, because I think in some of those circumstances, statistically, life inside of a broken home can usually lead to taking a path that can consist of drug addiction, that could consist of different patterns and behaviors that could either lead you to a life in and perhaps jail, prison, or in the streets, or it could even lead you to a place where you could lose your own life. That was the narrative back in that time. That was the narrative: is you either end up on the streets, you will end up in jail, or you will end up dead. That there was really no other option other than just those three. And so I'm grateful that the church, at such an early age for me, for my life, came to play, because it really protected me. It really provided a covering where I did not have to go and live a life on the streets. Rather than being on the streets, I was at the church. And that was a huge, huge blessing. So I'm really grateful for the church, being a part of my life. Now, life in the church, at 9 years old, I'm in my first year in church. I've been going to Sunday school. I've made friends, and I've really acquainted myself with the church. At 9 years old is a time period that the church began to offer music lessons. And so the music, the praise, and the worship team of the church began to offer music lessons. And so one of my brothers picked up the bass. Another one of my brothers picked up the piano. And so the only instrument that was available for me was the drums. And so I wasn't necessarily interested and seeking the drums as an instrument that I enjoyed. Rather, it was literally the only option available. So with one of my brothers on the bass, one of them on the piano, and then the only option available was the drums, then I, as a 9-year-old kid, I enrolled in these classes, and I immediately began to learn the drums. My first year, was spent really trying to develop a lot of the abilities to be able to play a beat. At 9 years old, I got such a tiny physique. I'm just a kid, 9 years old. I'm not even fully developed yet. And I'm trying to stretch to be able to feel the bass drum pedal. And, I'm like trying to swing as high as I can to be able to hit the cymbals. I'm barely able to just maneuver my way around the drum kit. The sticks are so big and I look so small behind the drum kit. But I was able to really give it some time, and I spent that year, I took the lessons from the church, and then I spent that year just continuing to develop my abilities behind the drums. So 9 years old, I'm playing drums. I took a couple of lessons, and music is introduced to my life. As time went by, I began to develop a stronger passion for music. So I'm playing the drums, and right now I am, going year after year. I'm playing for the church services, I'm playing for special events. And so my activity on the drums is becoming really, really active. And so I'm having a really good time as a young kid, being able to play drums in the church, being able to play for different services, for different functions throughout the week. And so the drums really began to grow and develop on me. I began to get that passion to play this instrument. So as I get to junior high a few years later, um, I enroll in music classes. I continue to enroll in the school bands. I continue to develop my abilities behind the drums. So at this point, I am committed. I am 100% committed to the drums. I'm playing the instrument, I'm playing for the services, and just having a really good time. I mean, my world 100% was just drums. Usually, when you're in junior high school, you want to go play some sports. You begin to kind of have your first experiences with pep rallies. You begin to have your first experiences with tournaments, with games. And so while everybody was out there in sports, I was taking music. And the funny story is, there's always a there's always in music somebody that stands out. And when I say stands out, I mean it looks like somebody doesn't belong there. Has nothing to do with their musical abilities, but you just see sometimes a kid and you're like, okay, yeah, he looks like he doesn't fit in here. And that was me. I really didn't have so much an appearance that looked like I belong in music. Usually the music students were very smart. The music students were advanced in academics, and a lot of my band members, they were, taking high school courses in junior high. And so a lot of the band members were intelligent. They were smart, and you can see that, they were very dedicated to academics, and they were very dedicated to their instrument. And I was dedicated to my instrument, but I was totally not dedicated to the academics. As a matter of fact, I would hang out with a lot of the Hispanic kids, because obviously I'm Hispanic. And so I would hang out with a lot of the Hispanic kids, and I would dress like the Hispanic kids. We'd all be wearing our matching t-shirts. We look like we're cultured. And so it's just an identity that you looked at me and it's like, I don't get how this kid is in band. It didn't make sense. The math wasn't mathing, in any way, shape, or form. I completely just looked like a standout. I looked like I didn't fit in. But thankfully, I had really, really good abilities behind the drums. And that's what really kept me going. I was really passionate about this instrument. I just wasn't passionate about the academics. So I was not a good student academically, but I was a good musician. That was where all my passion and all my attention was. So I squeaked through junior high. And, I did the bare minimum. I got C's in most of my classes. I got, D's in a couple of my classes as well. I mean, I barely squeaked through junior high to get into high school. And so now high school life begins for me. And so high school life now is different for me, because now I see that there is more groups, there is more bands, there is now an even greater opportunity for me to develop my musical abilities. So in high school, I joined the jazz band. I joined the symphony orchestra. I joined marching band. I joined drumline. I mean, I tried to participate in as much music and as much band as possible. And so I was playing percussion. For marching band, I had the big bass drum. So I was the guy with the bass drum, and the mallets. And I was hitting the bass drum. And I had the biggest bass drum because I was the biggest kid in the class. And eventually I got to a point where I made the snare line. And if you've been in marching band or if you've been in high school band, you understand that when you make the snare line, that is the highest place that you can get to. If you made the snare line, that means you were one of the better percussion players in the school. You had to audition for the part, and I was able to get the part. I made it to the snare line in my sophomore year, my second year of high school. So music was just completely overtaking my life. 100% music was overtaking my life. And junior high and high school was really just dedicated to music, band. I was still participating in the church and I would play for my church services on Sunday, but I was completely living a life that was completely surrounded by music. Music, I really can say, kept me from falling into perhaps any other path that could have led me in a completely different direction. A lot of my friends that I grew up with in junior high and a lot of my friends that I grew up with, in high school, unfortunately didn't make the end of high school. Some of them became early parents. A lot of my friends ended up either in jail. Some of them even ended up dead. And what I was surrounded with was definitely a place that could have taken me in a completely different direction. My surroundings, the way that I grew up, especially living in a household with a single mom that is, trying to do her best for her kids. All of this could have completely led me in a different direction, but I think that music and the church were the space that completely kept me from falling into a path that could have led me somewhere else. Now, my life was not perfect by any means. Although I was busy with music and although I was busy with church activities, life wasn't perfect all the time for me. Being exposed to drug addiction, being exposed to my friends who eventually fell into the same cycle of drug addiction and gangs and were eventually out on the streets. I mean, I was completely surrounded with being exposed to things a high schooler should not be exposed to. No high schooler should be exposed to drug addiction. No high schooler should be exposed to alcohol. No high schooler should be exposed to things that they shouldn't be watching online. I mean, I was surrounded by a lot of things that completely could have changed the course of my life. But I'm really grateful, really, really grateful that music and the church really kept me safe. When I say safe, I mean it kept me alive. It really kept me alive because there were moments where I was following the patterns of my friends and I wanted to be like them. I wanted to be like my friends. It was tough for me to be the only one in the circle. And like I said, I have this friend group, but I'm in music. And it's just like, why is he hanging out with the little cholitos, the little gangsters, and the little Hispanics? And yet he's in band. And then when I'm with the band members, I'm not somebody that is academically smart. Rather, I look like a little cholito, like a little Hispanic kid, and they're looking at me like, why are you here? And same with the other group, like, why are you here? So I completely found myself in a place where I was really trying to find some sort of identity. The only thing that I really related with was music, but I still had a lot of missing holes inside of myself that I was seeking an identity. Not having my father in those early years really did not present to me a father figure to strive for. I didn't have an example of a man in my life. And so identity was definitely something that was big for me. I really was trying to fit in as much as I could, just trying to find a place where I can find leadership, where I could find counseling, acceptance. And so I struggled a lot, really trying to fit in. And so even though I was really dedicated to music, I mean, music was the only place where I felt like I was succeeding, because I was trying to cover up the lack of acceptance, the rejection, and just the loneliness that I felt as I was growing up. And so that was my life. That was the issues that I was really struggling with. I really just couldn't find myself. I really was looking for a place and somewhere where I can say, you know what, this is my influence. This is an example to me. I really was living a life by myself, just experimenting with different people, different groups, trying to figure out where do I fit in. And so as I continued to grow up, I finished high school. And throughout junior high, high school, I was always very entertained with school and very entertained with church. But now that I graduated and high school ended for me, it was time to face adulthood. It was time to grow up. And I wanted to continue pursuing music. I did have that strong passion for music, but I was still struggling, obviously, with my identity. I did not know what to do. I had no plan whatsoever after high school. I had no plans or no intention of attending college. My grades were average, if not below average. So I didn't get any scholarships. I didn't get accepted into any big time universities. Um, I did not have high test scores. So I really had no path that was shaped for me for my adult life. And so the first thing that I did was I immediately began to work. That was the first thing that I could think of and say to myself, okay, maybe it's time to get a job. And so I started working. I started working at a restaurant. I worked for Sizzler. If you've ever been to Sizzler, I was a host for Sizzler, and then I was a dishwasher. And Sizzler was my very first job. And so I got a job at Sizzler, and I just began to work. And all of the money that I was earning, I was completely spending it on drum equipment. I was completely spending it on drum DVDs, drum videos. And, like I said, I was just really trying to find myself as an adult. And so as my adult life continued, I did go to community college and I took some courses for music in community college. Now, in community college was definitely a time that began to shape my life a little bit, because in community college my world completely changed. Once you get to community college, you're exposed to different paths. And so in community college, you have different majors. You have people that are striving to be able to go from here to a big time university. Sometimes some of my friends were in the military, but they were going to community college. And so they were trying to get a degree of some sort. So the world completely changed for me when I was in community college. And so, as I'm in community college, I take a couple of courses for music. That was the first thing I said to myself. You know what? If I'm going to go to college, I'm going to take a few courses on music. So I immediately enrolled in jazz performance, jazz studies, and continued my passion for the drums. And this is where my life shifted a little bit, because at this point, since I was 8, 9 years old, that's when my journey on the drums began. And since my journey on the drums began when I was about 8 or 9 years old, I'm now about 20, 21 years old. I'm in community college. So it's been about 11, 12 years of me playing the drums. And you know what was another thing that was really surprising was that even though I had spent about 12 years playing the drums, this is where I immediately took an interest in music theory. I wanted to learn how to compose music. And so since I wanted to learn how to compose music, that's where I began to learn music theory. I began to take piano courses. And so this is where my journey began, understanding music theory and understanding how to play the piano. So the piano became an instrument that I began to learn at 21 years old. And so I was still going hard and heavy on the drums, but I began to learn how to play the piano and learn music theory at 21 years old. And so this is where my world shifted a little bit. And as I'm learning the piano, my heart begins to develop a passion to want to compose music. So that's where my mind shifted from just wanting to play drums to wanting to compose music. Now remember, throughout this whole time, I'm always in school and I'm active in the church. So my goal was to completely take all of these abilities in college and bring them back to the church. In the church, I had been exposed to God. I had seen God do miracles in other people. I had seen different people's lives begin to transform in the church. And although I was exposed to a lot of things within the church, I saw the work of ministry. I saw people turn their life around. I saw the rehabilitation center. I saw my brother turn his life around. As a young kid, I'm watching all of this go on and I'm being exposed to everything. But I have not had my own personal encounter with God to say that now I know what God has designed for me to do on this earth. And so this is where my life begins to take a turn. I begin to develop a sense of wanting to write music, but I began to also have an encounter with God. This is where God was really getting involved in my life. When I was younger, did I get exposed to a lot of things? Yeah, absolutely. I saw prayers, I saw miracles, I saw transformations. I saw people come to the church, I saw people come to the rehabilitation centers. I saw a lot, but I did not have my own personal experience or personal testimony. And so this is the time where God begins to deal with me. So now that I'm an adult, now that I have to shape my own path, God begins to come into my life and begins to put that desire in me to want to write music, to want to learn this instrument. And so I began to take my courses on the piano. I began to take my classes seriously when it came to music theory and to the piano. And then immediately in the church, what God began to do is that he began to open up opportunities for me no longer to play drums anymore. Now he began to open up opportunities for me to be able to now play the piano. And so it is a new shift for me now to be able to play the piano at the church. Because at first I was just the drums. I was having a lot of fun. And when you're playing drums, you're playing the rhythm. But now that I was beginning to play the piano, this is where I began to understand a little bit how to work together with the singers, how to work together with the other instruments. And so God began to put this desire in my heart to be able to now operate and work within the worship team. This is where the call of God over my life came to have the desire to become a worship leader. And when I say worship leader, not a worship singer, rather the person who begins to now operate and take lead of the ministry, praise and worship. And so this is where my world began to change. I began to see things completely differently. As I was playing the piano, it was no longer about just the joy of being a musician. This is where I began to take seriously the impact that God can have on someone's life when you're playing an instrument. What I began to realize right away is that music can become a tool that prepares the place for the presence of God to be able to descend. And so as a Christian, this is what I began to focus on. Is I began to focus on being able to prepare the place, to be able to prepare the atmosphere, play music, and create a place where the people can freely come and worship God genuinely. And they could be able to express themselves and sing along with us. And so my mind completely began to change. This is where God began to get a hold of me. This is where my relationship with God got serious. And so as I am continuing to develop this area of my life to become somebody that leads the praise and worship team, God was definitely preparing my character, and God was dealing with me in a way that was preparing my character for the challenges that were going to come with taking the responsibility of the praise and worship ministry. And so at a very young age, 22, 23 years old, I'm working with the worship ministry, and I'm beginning to face a lot of challenges. I begin to now face different challenges trying to deal with certain characters, certain attitudes. And I'm not just talking about one or two specific people, but you have different age groups in the worship and praise ministry. You have different attitudes. You have different backgrounds. And so I was not prepared for the responsibility that was going to come with working with the praise and the worship ministry. I really wasn't. I wasn't prepared. And so this is where God began to immediately shift my circumstances. I did not have any sense of responsibility as I was growing up. So this is where God began to change my circumstances so that I could learn responsibility. And so 22, 23 years old, I am now learning how to be responsible for my life. I am learning how to be responsible for my relationship with God. And so since I am learning how to be responsible in my relationship with God, I am now learning how to pray. I am now learning how to fast. I am now learning how to think selflessly. I'm somebody that likes to fit in. I'm somebody that likes acceptance. And rejection was very, very big for me. And because rejection was very, very big for me, it was always hard to get pushed back. I couldn't deal with rejection. I had a hard time with rejection. Rejection was one of those things that really hurt me more than anything else. I always loved a good compliment. Hey, good job. You know what? You did great today. But when I received criticism, hey, you need to fix this, you need to fix that area. And then people began to come into my life, leaders, pastors, and they began to correct these areas of my life. It was really hurting my ego. It was really hurting my pride. It was really hurting my persona. Because I grew up trying to find my identity, but now rejection is beginning to sink in very, very deep. And so rejection was one thing that I really had a hard time dealing with. Sometimes criticism and correction is necessary, and I totally understand that. What I did not understand was how to handle the correction, how to handle the criticism, because immediately what would happen to me is when somebody criticized me, when somebody judged me, when somebody came to correct me, it would hurt me all the way down to my soul, thinking that I wasn't doing good. I would take it very personal, and I would take the criticism as hard as I possibly could. And that's not good. It's not a good way to live, because I began to form this lifestyle of seeking acceptance. Because it was so hard for me to really hear the criticism, I began to seek a lifestyle of acceptance. I began to seek a lifestyle of perfectionism, because I did not want to let anybody down. I did not want to let people down. I did not want to let my leaders down. I did not want to let my bosses down. I really had a hard time with rejection. And I just want to tell anyone that is really having a hard time with rejection, whether the rejection is coming from your family, whether the rejection is coming from the church, whether the rejection is coming from your friends, from teachers, from coaches, from whoever you have around you, I just want to tell you this, is that don't let the criticism become your identity. I allowed the criticism to become my identity, and I looked at myself as somebody who was never good enough. And I can do 10 or 20 different things right. When it came time to get corrected, and when it came time to face the rejection or the criticism again, believe me, I identified so strongly with it that I would beat myself up so hard, because I said to myself, look, there you go again. See? There you go again, making the same mistakes. There you go again, not being good enough, not being good enough. And I would sing that every single day. And sometimes that voice isn't even coming from your own self. Sometimes that voice is coming from the enemy himself. Sometimes the enemy himself surrounds you with a voice, with people that are constantly telling you you're not good enough. And so if you're really facing rejection, I want to tell you, it's not that you have to be good enough. It's that God chose you. When you come to God, and when you come before his presence, and you come to the church, and you come to the family of God, when you come to the family of Jesus Christ, God chose you. God is the one that has decided to love you, and God has poured out his love for you. And there is no need to feel rejected in any way, because even though other people may criticize you, and the people around you may judge you and try to come against you, God loves you, and God said that you were worth it. God is the one that decided that he would give his life for you. And so don't let rejection take your identity. To really overcome this situation, God really put me in a position where he had to really allow me to understand that I needed to rely on him. Because if I relied on anybody else, if I relied on other people's acceptance, I would never be good enough. I would never be good enough. And that was my biggest struggle as an adult. Rejection. Rejection. That being said, God began to deal with me in a way where I had to trust him. So God began to close my circumstances. God completely began to shut a lot of doors. There came a point where I had to make a big and strong decision for my life. If I was really going to really break away from this rejection, I made a really strong decision to move out of my home, to move over to another city. I moved out to San Diego, and I moved into my pastor's house. I completely let go of my surroundings. I completely got away from this space of rejection. And I immediately moved out over to San Diego County. and I moved into my pastor's house. And that is where God began to deal with my character the most. I'm really grateful to this day that God was able to use my pastor and allowed me into his home, because my pastor, I'm grateful that God gave him the wisdom and the guidance to come and talk to me and be able to listen to what I had to say. But he was one of the very few people, if not the only person, that would be able to listen to my life, that would be able to listen to that need that I had in my heart of acceptance. And he would not judge me and he would not criticize me. He was always seeking to help me. And that was something that I appreciated. I came to realize that the rejection and that acceptance that was in my heart, that pursuit of acceptance that was in my heart, I immediately began to understand was because of the lack of leadership in my life. And when I say leadership, it is because when I was younger, I needed my father. And my father, because he wasn't present throughout these early years, I grew up seeking other people's acceptance. And my pastor understood that. And so my pastor, by the grace of God, was one of the people that immediately helped not only fill the void that I had in my heart of acceptance, but also began to redirect me to God. God became my father. God became the father that I needed. And my pastor helped me point in that direction. Because when I was needing love and acceptance, God was there to provide love and acceptance for me. When I understood that God sent his only son to die for me so that I could be with him, so that I may be in his presence, I understood how much God loved me. I understood how much God wanted to be with me. I understood how much God accepted me. And that really helped break this need of acceptance, this fear of rejection that I had began to go away, because God began to do a work in my life and began to provide for me the love and the acceptance that I needed. And that is where my life completely turned around 100%. I began to look at life differently. I no longer was seeking acceptance from other people. Rather, I was looking at other people on how I can love and accept them. Now I no longer had the need to be accepted. Now I became somebody's need for acceptance. And I began to seek and help others, especially some young boys and young men that were growing up without leadership or without an example in their lives. I was able to go and see them as if I saw myself. And that's one of the beautiful things that I love about God, is that God not only takes you to a place where he fills the voids of your heart, but he also allows you to be in a place where you can become the vessel that he uses to reach other people. And that is how my life completely turned around. Now I was beginning to look at people with love and acceptance and encouragement and allowing them to develop themselves. And instead of becoming a voice of rejection, a voice of criticism, or a voice of judgment, I was able to become a voice of appreciation, a voice of encouragement, and a voice of acceptance, and a voice of love. And now, not only was my life changed, but now my character had completely taken a huge jump from somebody seeking acceptance, from somebody broken to now somebody helping heal others. And let me tell you, that is something that only the power of God can do. I want to be able to share with whoever sees this that the power of God transforms. The power of God is the only answer that we need. If you find yourself in a current situation, battling things that perhaps have controlled your life for many, many years, whether that's things that you're watching, things that you're consuming, substances that you're consuming, patterns that you're repeating, abuse, wherever and whatever condition and state you find yourself in, I want to tell you that God not only can become the answer to your life and fill those voids in your heart that you were missing, but God can also take your life, heal your heart, heal your mind, heal your body. He can heal every aspect of your life that needs healing, and he can restore you. But he can also turn you into an instrument, a vessel that then goes out and helps others who also were in the same condition that you were in. And so even though I grew up full of rejection and in the need of acceptance, now I began to become a voice of acceptance for others. And how beautiful is that God can take a life, not only restore it, but God can then use that same life that he restored to help restore the lives of other people. That is only found in the presence of God. That is the power that is found in Jesus Christ's death and resurrection. Is that he paid the price for us so that we can be healed, so that we can be restored. But not only is it just about our own restoration, but it is also about going out into the world, into our cities, into society, and being able to become an instrument, a vessel for those that were in the same condition that we were in. And I never imagined my life to be that way. I never imagined my life to break free from the need of acceptance, but to also be able to learn how to value and how to accept others. That was a really big transformation. That is where my encounter with God really sunk in. From being exposed at a young age to ministry and to the things that God can do. But when you experience it for yourself, when that experience comes to you, and you look at your life and you say, you know what, I can't live this way no more. And you're able to turn to God. And God says, you know what, I love you just the way that you are. I made you in my image. I can restore your life. I can restore the pain. I can restore the hurt. Not only can I put you back together, but I can take your life and I can allow your life to be an instrument, to be a vessel for other people out there who also found themselves in your condition. That is where my perspective completely changed. And I began to see the lives of other people as if they were me when I was a young boy trying to find that acceptance. By the grace of God, I have continued on with music. Music has become a tool that's connected me with so many people. Through music, I've been able to travel to different parts of the U.S. I've been able to travel to Mexico. I've been able to travel to Cuba. I've connected with so many people from different cultures, different backgrounds, through music, of course. But at the same time, it was no longer about the music. My life became a life where music connected me with the world. But in order for the world to be transformed, in order for the world to be healed, in order for people to be able to leave with a beautiful experience of God's grace and mercy, it was that experience, my testimony, the Word of God, my experience with Jesus Christ that led me to a place where I can now become a vessel and help others in need, regardless of the culture, regardless of the background. And I'm grateful that God has put me in a position where I have been able to connect with many people. And as well, I've been able to share this same testimony. I've been able to share my faith with others. And I've been able to see people give themselves to Jesus Christ in a way where not only is their life restored, but then they go out and they reach others. And how beautiful is it to see people's lives being restored, and then those people going out and reaching the lives of others, and then those people getting restored, and then those people going out. That is what the love of God can do in a person's life. And that is what the love of God consists of, is taking you in, not only paying the price for your sins, but restoring you, and then also using you as a vessel and an instrument to reach others. It's a beautiful thing to see. I am continuing in that same path. Wherever God takes me, whether that's in a different country, whether that is in my local Sunday service, it doesn't matter where I go, because now my intention is to be able to go share that experience that I had with God and share it with others and become a vessel and an instrument so that others can see the miraculous, transformative power of God. They could see his mercy, his grace, and his love. Now that it has been a few years and I've allowed God to work into my life, God has taken me from one blessing to another. And so I continue to work in my church praise and worship team. I continue to work with praise and worship teams all over Mexico, all over Latin America, Cuba, Panama. I mean, wherever God opens the door, I will be there, and I will be the vessel that he wants to use. But I needed that experience with God to be reminded of his love and mercy. And I am also grateful because through that experience, through what I have learned, God has also blessed me, not only in ministry, but personally. I now find myself married, and I've been able to grow in my marriage, and I've been able to learn how to love another person, how to love my wife with an intense love, because God was the one that showed me his love. And now I no longer carry the need for acceptance. Now I am able to pour my love out on my wife. I am able to have a genuine relationship with my wife. And we are able to communicate in a way where we both know that we love each other and that we accept each other. And I'm grateful that it has not just been about music, but God has dealt with my character, and God has also allowed me to experience this beautiful journey that is marriage. That's what God can do with the life of a broken person. Growing up, single parent household, a mother always working, a father who was not present for a while. But now I find myself no longer needing acceptance because I've been accepted by God. But now I can go be a vessel. I can be a good husband. I can build a family of my own. And I can completely change the course of my life. And not only my life, but the life of the generations that are to come out of my life and my wife's. I know that one day I will have children. And I know that now I can pass blessing over to my children. And not only has God given me a wife and a family of my own, I'm also grateful that I can see my mother. I spend time with my mother. I have breakfast with my mom. I have lunch with my mother. I call her as much as I can, but as well, I also have a great relationship with my father. When I got married, my father was at my wedding. My father was able to take pictures with me. I was able to build those memories with my father as an adult. And even though as a young kid, he may not have been there, God gave me my father back. And God not only brought him back so that we can have a relationship, me and my father, but I've been able to communicate with my father and let him know that I'm not hurt. I've been able to communicate with my father that I'm not angry. I'm not upset. I'm not disappointed. That I'm just very happy and appreciate that I can have him in my life, even if it is as an adult. Because I think as an adult, as I continue to face challenges, I know that my dad will be there to help me one way or another. And I'm grateful that I now have the voice of advice, the voice of experience in my life. Because whenever I make decisions, I now have the voice of my father that says, hey, this is what I went through. These are the decisions that I made. And I find myself completely blessed with not only a ministry where I can serve God in music. I find myself with my own family, me and my wife building a family of our own. But I also find with my immediate family, with my mother and my father and my brothers, we're all in close relationship. I call them, I talk to them. No bitterness, no resentment, no rejection, no hurt anymore. Because of what God has done in my character and in my life, I am able to enjoy everything that He has given me. Even the simplest things of being able to see your parents, see your wife, see your brothers, see my little nephews, my nieces. God has restored everything abundantly. Abundantly, where now those needs for family, that needs of love, the needs of acceptance, I look around and I see my family and I see how blessed we are. And I see how God has transformed even my brother in drug addiction. My other brother is a truck driver. He's got his family and he supports his family. A good father. Another one has started his own business. And I see how God has really blessed our family from being a struggling family with a single mom to now all four of us married with our own families, with kids, seeing my mom enjoy her grandkids. I'm really grateful that God is so good that He can change the direction of your life. This is my testimony. I know I'm 29 years old. There is much more ground to cover. I've given my life to God at such a young age. But I'm grateful that God has dealt with certain things inside of my attitude, my character, my need for acceptance, my need for a father, that I now find myself blessed. And wherever God is going to continue to take the direction of my life, what I want to do is not only build my relationship with God, but I also want to lead others to have the same experience that I did. Because not only is it about a system, this is a relationship. Coming and getting to know God. God makes Himself known to His children. And God has mercy. God is love. And God shows that to you. And I look to develop my relationship with God even further and continue to share my experiences on this podcast. But I wanted to share with you guys my testimony, my story, my challenges. and the reason why I do what I do every day. And so I hope that this podcast continues to be a reflection of the transformative power of God as I continue to engage in conversation, as I continue to engage with other people, continue to speak. All I want to do is completely shine a light and say, God is the one that has transformed my life. I am grateful for God's mercy and God's grace on my life. God has transformed my life. He's giving me a new character, a new heart, a new mind, and He's given me a family of my own. And I just want to tell you, if you don't know whether you should accept God or not, whether you think God is real or not, I just invite you to try Him. I just invite you to give Him a chance and let Him make Himself evident to you. God is merciful, and God reveals Himself to those who have an open heart that are willing to accept Him. So accept God, give God a chance, and let Him prove Himself to you. I'm really grateful for everybody that has taken the time to subscribe to this channel. Continue to engage. I want to hear from all of you as much as I can. I want to hear questions, and when I say here, I want to be able to read them. I want to be able to read in the comments questions that you may have. How did this testimony help you in any way, shape, or form? I really appreciate any and all feedback. So like, comment, share, subscribe, and I will see you guys on my next episode of the Safe Haven Podcast. Have a blessed day.